Pixar's first 11 films are incredible. Highly regarded as one of the greatest runs the studio can have, Pixar just couldn't miss. These first 11 films have an aggregate Rotten Tomatoes score of 95%. The lowest rated movie is Cars with a score of 74%, but all other 10 movies score 92% or higher. There are also 5 movies with a score of 98% or higher, including 2 perfect 100s. It is unheard of, and it put Pixar in a league of their own. But then, something happened. Pixar's following 15 films have an aggregate Rotten Tomatoes score of roughly 84.5%. The lowest rated movie has an abysmal score of 39%, while 6 of the 14 films weren't even able to score above 80%. And movies with a 98% or higher? Only 1. So, what happened?
Dadgum. That fella from the karate didn't
It's Cars 2. Cars 2 ruined Pixar. Most people will agree. Cars 2 sucked. Plain and simple. Cars 1, a straightforward movie about friendship and not being a douchebag. Cars 2, a spy thriller where 18 cars died. I counted, that's a real number. It was a bad movie. But more importantly, there is a consensus that Cars 2 doesn't feel like a Pixar movie. It feels like Pixar phoned it in and strictly made a sequel for money. And I think they did. The evidence is all there. Before Cars 2, Pixar had only made 2 sequels, Toy Story 2 and 3. But those sequels made sense. They followed a story thread set up in the first movie. Andy will grow up and move on. Each movie elevated and grew that concept until the climax in Toy Story 3. The execution was perfect. But then, out of all the movies they could have made a sequel to out of those first 11, they chose Cars. They had The Incredibles, a movie primed and ready for a sequel, and they went with Cars. And they didn't even attempt to follow any kind of common story thread. They went from the big race to the big terrorist attack.
We snuck a bomb in McQueen's pit.
And the crazy part is, they had a theme they could have continued, which they eventually did in Cars 3. The idea of getting older and no longer being able to keep up with younger athletes is a very common occurrence we see in real sports every year. And I think the idea translated quite well in Cars 3. So why is Mater a fucking spy? Pixar's lack of creativity has been evident over the later years. Of the 15 movies from Cars 2 onward, 7 of them are either sequels, prequels, or spin-offs. That means barely half of their movies over the last 11 years have been original stories. But money talks. What does the box office say about this change in quality? For these numbers, I'm only going to be looking at domestic gross, since there are too many fluctuations and variables that make the worldwide gross inconsistent. For example, Lightyear was banned in 14 countries. The 11 films pre-Cars 2 grossed a total of about $2,947 million, which averages to roughly $268 million per movie. The 11 movies from Cars 2 and after, not including COVID releases, grossed a total of $3,187 million, which averages out to about $219 million per movie. That means the latter films only grossed about $22 million more per movie, or 8.1% more. And that's before inflation. Yeah, don't forget about that fun little calculation.
Surprise, motherfucker.
Even out the value of the dollar, and the pre-Cars 2 era ends up grossing $63 million more per movie. And remember, this was before Pixar was established as a powerhouse that people would go see simply because the name Pixar was slapped on a film. But you can put all these numbers aside to tackle the real issue I think we can all agree on. Pixar just feels different. Before Cars 2, nobody questioned Pixar's choices. You went into their movies knowing they were going to deliver a product that was great to amazing. But after a slate of movies consisting of Cars 2, Brave, Monsters University, Inside Out, and The Good Dinosaur, we as an audience started getting weary. Those movies scream inconsistency, ranging from incredible to Oscar's position in Shark Tale.
There's whale poo, and then there's you.
Turning Red is a great example of Pixar's current state. It currently has the highest rating split between critics and audiences of any Pixar movie. And I think the reason for this boils down to one simple question. Who is this movie for? What makes Pixar's early films so amazing and unique is that they're for everyone. They're animated children's movies that adults can also enjoy and feel emotion over and connect with. Everyone used to get something out of these movies. The reason for this is because they are written by adults. Adults that understand they can't connect to today's youth through brute force, i.e. what the Emoji Movie tried to do. Instead, they write their movies with adult themes that translate to all ages. They don't try to reach into a generation they don't fully understand. They use what they know. For example, movies about your children/friends growing up and moving on in their life, story about losing loved ones and trying to hold on to the ones you have, family that's falling apart, widowed husband who learns to enjoy life again, the loss of childhood innocence, and a movie that literally tackles the idea of death. Adults writing adult stuff wrapped up in a fun animated movie. But Turning Red feels like an adult trying to write to children, because that's exactly what it is. It's a fine story, and the animation is great, but it's just not Pixar. And this isn't a slam on the filmmakers. Domi Shi also directed the incredible Bao short, and who didn't love that? Like I said, things have just gotten inconsistent. But of course, not all hope is lost. Yes, Cars 2 is an absolute dumpster fire that seems to have spread into the greater Pixar world. But not always. Coco and Inside Out are amazing original stories, and I think Soul is one of Pixar's greatest of all time. Pixar has plenty of time to redeem themselves and get back on the track that made their movies a must-watch simply because it had their name on it. I have faith in you, Pixar. Don't let Tomato bring you down, because you're better than that. Because you are Tomato, but without the ta. You still matter. It was a stretch.